Okay, go ahead, Sue. Welcome. So that you can take us through. Kindly unmute. You're allowed to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that, James. Hi, everybody. I know that we're expecting a lot of people to be joining along the way. We have just under 80 people who've registered for this presentation today. And I know that we're coming from all over Kenya, but also other parts of the world. And I know that there will be connectivity issues all over as well. So we'll get numbers dropping in and dropping out, but we'll try to make sure that everybody gets value from this presentation. So I wanted to start by explaining a little bit about the iCow Soil Advocates Forum, why we do this, where it started. A little bit of history for people that don't know, and also the possibility of you then engaging with us going forward if that's something that you want to do. Emmanuel Kira is in bed. I just saw him. He was in his sheets. Kira, you got to be careful when you put your camera on. But relax and enjoy the presentation. I know you're laughing. I know that we've managed your mic, so you can't say anything. So the iCow Soil Advocates Forum started about 6 to 7 months ago. And the reason that it started was because of our soil advocacy program. And that started about 2 years ago. We were inspired by the Kiss the Ground organization and the soil advocacy work they were doing. We were further inspired by the Elaine Ingham Soil Food Web program that she's been doing. And we developed our own program here in Kenya called the Soil Advocates Program. We have 2 programs now, the Soil Advocacy Program and also the Soil Microscopy Program. Both of them run for a period of 3 months, and both of them at this point in time are free for people who join. What started to happen that was quite funny, our first students, and many of you, I can see them in the room, and a big shout out to all of our first students. We started the Soil Advocates, the Border Soil Advocates Program, and we focused and invited border riders to join the program. We imagined and we hoped that because they were connected, because they had tablets, they were connected in their communities, we designed a program that helped them to teach soil advocacy at home and within the communities. And this was during the COVID period where there was a lot of lockdown and a lot of us had a lot of spare time. So we thought, let's leverage some of that and still do good stuff, even though we can't get out there. And we thought the program was going to come to an end and everybody would get on doing the things and going on with the information that they learned, but it didn't end. People just wanted more. In fact, when we spoke about the end, people were almost, panicking and saying, but what's next? We want more. And that led on to a variety of different programs that we have since done, the 2 different programs. And also we thought to touch base with all of the students. They're all currently going through our courses at different stages. We built the iCow Soil Advocacy Forum to network us all together and show different innovations across the world, have different speakers join us across the world, etc., so that we can learn things that we don't typically see here. One of our guest speakers, we all love him, was Andre Loy. He was the former president of IFOAM, the International Federation of Organic Movements, and is now the president of Regeneration International. Andre's program, the 1 Billion Agave program, is something that I have been felt for many years now, well, almost one and a half years, that we need to share here. It's very, very timely. Kenya is currently undergoing one of its worst droughts in 40 years. And one of the biggest areas, the biggest impacts has been our livestock and our livestock feed. So I reached out to the wonderful team at the 1 Billion Agave program, and I said, will you share your program with us? And I found that not only is it in Mexico, where it started, and it started with Mexican farmers, it's also being copied in other countries around the world. So today we're going to be looking at that program. If you've got your photographs of the agave, one of the things we wanted to do was to take photographs and to use them as our profile pictures. The reason we wanted to do that was to just see across the country the different varieties of agave. So agave is like one of sisal is one of the agave plants. I'm not going to tell you much more. We're very, very honored today to have a individual by the name of Riker, I don't know how if I'm going to say that name properly, Vermilye, Riker Vermilye joining us. And James, you need to give him his microphone. And he is going to take us through the agave program and take us through it with as much as we can a view to our Kenyan conditions, what we can do, what we can learn, and what of those innovations can we copy paste in Kenya. And he's going to talk about his experience having worked out there and worked in Madagascar on the same program. So after that, we'll have questions and answers. But Riker, I'm handing it over to you now. Thank you so much for joining us, and off you go.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited that you guys are interested in the program and want to see what it can bring to Kenya. So I thought maybe just to start off, we would play a quick video. If it would be possible to share my screen. I think I need the host's permission to do that, and then I can play you guys a quick video from Mexico. But so while we're waiting for that, I guess I'll just give you a brief background about myself. I'm from the United States in Washington, D.C. I went to college for economics and ended up working in finance and banking policy here in the United States. But I quickly realized that it didn't matter how good our banks were structured if the ecosystem around us was sort of collapsing. So I made a shift to working with agriculture, and I ended up in Madagascar with the Peace Corps, where I worked in the south of Madagascar, where they've been having drought conditions for the past 4 or 5 years as well. So it sounds like they're in a very similar situation to what you guys are facing in terms of trying to keep livestock alive in very difficult conditions, both for water and for growing agave. So I found that in Madagascar, they have large sort of legacy colonial plantations of agave and sisal. Sounds like the same situation that you guys have there in Kenya, in which the agave has grown outside of the plantation and now exists along the sides of fields, in the fences, and in some wild areas as well. So it's sort of spread and up until now has not been looked on as much of a resource for farmers, but we're trying to look at that to change it because of sort of the characteristics of agave that make it an exceptionally easy, I will say exceptionally easy plant to grow even in drought conditions. So as Sue was saying, there's over 200 species of agave. Most of them are from Mexico and South Central America. But what makes them really important for our work is that they have been trained and lived for a long time in extreme drought conditions. So they are extremely water efficient. They only open up their pores at night. So they exchange water at night, lessening their water usage. They collect water from the air as sort of water, mist, and vapor passes by their leaves, funnel water towards the roots. And then they have a very extensive and shallow root system to make sure that when there is rain, they suck up as much as they can, that they then store in their waxy leaves to keep it for as long time as possible. So in terms of water usage, agave is about, with cactus, about the most efficient plants possible, which is why we think it's so important to use in the dry lands over the world. Okay, so let's see if I can share my screen now. Okay, perfect. I can see that. Let's pull this up and see if this works.
At the Organic Research Farm in north central Mexico, and we're looking at 25 acres that we're about to plant 2,000 agave plants in each, well, 1,000 an acre, and we're going to plant.
Are you guys seeing this? Sorry.
Mesquite trees transplanted in between the
We dropped your screen.
How about now?
area where
Perfect.
we've grown corn and beans.
It's okay now. It's okay now.
It's very difficult to grow with the changing climate and the fact that we don't have a well here. 86% of Mexican farmers do not have wells. According to the government, 90% of small farms are not economically viable. So we're introducing this system of native plants of agave and these mesquite trees that are native or huisache, and we're going to produce a whole lot of food for animals, and we're going to produce with the mesquite food for humans as well. And one of the things that we use in those white bags there, that's biochar or biocarbon in Spanish. It's a form of charcoal that makes an excellent additive to agricultural soils. When you mix a bit of the biochar in with the compost and you put it on the soil, you increase the water retention up to 70%. You also help produce more soil fertility. So that's one of the amendments we use. We have also compost that we make here that has high levels of fungi, mycorrhizal fungi, that we're going to be putting in with the agaves as we start to plant them this week. We've been waiting for the rainy season, which is supposed to start tomorrow. Basically, in this part of Mexico, you have a 4-month rainy season, and then it doesn't rain at all for 8 months. This week, we're going to start planting thousands and thousands of agaves in this area, and we're preparing the trees for grafting that we're going to plant next March. This is, there are 140 varieties of agaves growing across the world. 20% of the world's landscapes have one or more varieties of this plant growing. This is one of the larger ones. This is called a maguey pulqueta. And the great thing about these plants is they suck down a lot of carbon from the atmosphere to produce this enormous amount of biomass. These plants are probably only 5 years old here. What farmers discovered is that if you chop this up really finely with a machine, well, first you cut the lower branches, the pruning, but you chop them up in this machine. It looks like green coleslaw when it comes out. And the key then is we put them in these buckets, and we get the oxygen out, stamp that, and we ferment these in an anaerobic environment for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, these chopped up agave leaves turn into a highly nutritious, healthy animal feed, which animals love. It's sort of like how humans have rediscovered fermented foods. Well, farmers have rediscovered in this area the value of fermented foods for animals. So I'll show you a little later the machinery that these farmers invented that we use to chop these up. But this is the key. In the state of Jalisco in Mexico.
All right, so that was just sort of an overview of the project that's happening in Mexico. Hopefully you guys were able to hear and see some of that, but I'm happy to go over anything that you guys weren't able to get the first time. So basically the idea behind the, oh, Sue, I see you got your hand up, so please jump in if you'd like. Oh, no, okay. So the main idea behind the project is how do we feed livestock in areas in which it's difficult to grow corn and other silage and forage crops, and sort of particularly where there's a long dry season in which it's very difficult to provide water and nutrition for animals. So I'll go ahead and sort of show some pictures from basically, once I saw in Madagascar that we had all of these plants, I needed to figure out what to do with them. So that's when I headed down to Mexico to meet with the Billion Agave Project and work with them on their project. So let me see if I can show you guys some photos now from where we were working. Can you guys see this? Okay, good. Yeah, so the Billion Agave Project is a sort of collaboration with a number of different organizations that you can see here. We've worked in Mexico with research institutes to sort of test the project, or test the fiber and what comes in the livestock feed, so we have an understanding of sort of nutrition. And then we work with local farmers in Mexico to sort of implement the project. So these are various farmers in Mexico. You can see him growing the agave from seed here. This is actually in the town of Sisal, where all of the agave, Sisal agave comes from. And then, so I'll jump through a bit quickly here to get to the process of making it, and we can come back to some of this stuff with the trees and lands, how it works within the landscape. So we were working with every sort of livestock that you can imagine. We had goats, sheep, cows, chickens, horses, donkeys, pigs. Everything can eat this as long as it's in a mix with other things within the diet. So here's the machine, or one of the types of machines that you can use to chop the pencas. You can see the video here. It runs off of a large tractor. So, I understand that having a tractor is not necessarily feasible everywhere. So there's also a model of this that runs off of a diesel or gas generator, which is another option for chopping it up. So here's the intermediate product that is then put inside of the containers. Here they're putting it inside of small paint buckets, about 10 liters, I think. Excuse me, 20 liters. Here's the machine in which you can chop it up with the gas powered variety. But it really, you can sort of, there's a number of different ways to execute the system, as long as you have the fundamentals in place of chopping it up, putting it in a contained system, taking out the air and letting it sit for 45 days. And so I wanted to show here's another system for packing the sisal material into a container as well. So this is the final product. So this is what it would look like after 30 to 45 days. You can sort of see on the top, there's a bit of white mold and oxidization. So you want to take that out. It's sort of the rich yellow color like this that we're looking for underneath. When it's finished after 45 days or so, you can smell a very sweet fermented scent to it. So you'll be able to smell the sugars, and that's sort of how you know it will be good and done when it's ready. So this is a partner of ours that we're working with, where they have a large cattle operation where they're storing, hundreds and hundreds of tons at a time. So it can be done both at the small scale as well as at the larger scale. And then here is sort of what we're aiming for. This is the end goal, is to feed livestock. So we really think it's important to show that this is not just sort of a good idea and let's hope and pray that it works, but no, this is something where we've had results in Mexico, and now we're trying to share it elsewhere across the world. You can see these guys. I think in this particular case, we're using a mix where we're using mesquite powder, which is a type of tree, a tree seed pod that you can change out for acacia, or Sue mentioned there was a prosopis type tree that you guys have in Kenya. So it's just a little bit of an additive to introduce some protein along with the fiber and carbohydrates. So you can see a little bit of the mix here with the sheep eating both the agave as well as the mix. And so then briefly, I'll just talk about my experience. So after going to Mexico, I returned to Madagascar, to the south, where I'm working to start a project called Agave. And what we have here is sort of large, or what we have there are large sisal factories that I think we have 65,000 hectares of planted agave that produce fiber for ropes and bags, like Sue says you guys also have in Kenya. And so you may know some of the process here, but this is sort of the process we have in Mexico, where they cut the leaves in the fields. They're then pulped and shredded to produce fiber, and the waste is thrown out into the fields, where it is left to dry and then either burned, and this wastewater is returned to the river. So what we're trying to do is basically deflect or take some of the waste product from this sisal production and turn it into livestock feed. So we're taking biomass directly from the source at the factory, taking out some of the longer strings of fibers, because in this case, we're not chopping it up like we were with the machines. The fiber is being extracted from the leaf whole. So it's important in this case to remove the longer strings of fiber, just so that they're not they don't choke the animals as they're eating it. So there's a couple different distinctions, and I'm happy to sort of answer questions on those. So here's the system we're using in Madagascar, where we're putting it into large plastic containers. And then trying to take as much of the air out of it here. This is we've upgraded our masher since then to really take more air out of it. And then we set it up with an airlock. So what happens inside of the vessel is that yeast and bacteria consume the sugars and carbohydrates within, and the chemical compounds within the agave, and transform that into available sugars and nutrients for cattle. But what happens is gas is produced in that process. And so what we want to have happen is we want gas to be able to come out of the container, but we don't want air to be able to replace it and come back into the container. So we've set up here a very rudimentary airlock system that you can do with, a hose and an empty water bottle. But there are also smaller varieties that you can use as well that are a bit easier to use. So yeah, that's generally the overview of the system. I can talk a bit more about the other uses of agave, but maybe we can save some of that for question and answer, and maybe Sue can point us in a bit of a direction here if she's got any ideas, and then we can open it up.
Thank you, Riker. That's actually really amazing. First of all, you're in such a lucky space to have such a great name for, I think, Mad Agave, because
yes, yeah.
I mean, that's so cool. Mad Agave, love it. So things. I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about the production, the planting of the timelines, and then the kind of smallholders in Madagascar. Are any of them adopting planting agave? And if so, how are they doing that? What have you seen? as the uptake also in areas where perhaps, I guess when I think about Kenya and I think about our drought, I kind of think that a lot of the land will be taken up for food if we get a little bit of rain, but agave can take up the spaces that we don't use for food, for example, our fence lines and things like that. So I'd like you to talk about that a little bit. You did mention the I don't even know how to say that word, but our madenge tree. So where we're looking at waste products, in this case, we're looking at madenge, which we tend to look at as being an invasive, really bad plant. But when we look at it through the eyes of an agave, highly nutritious and protein mix for livestock, it then becomes an asset. And the fact that we have a lot of it it turns into, a pretty good thing. So so one, I'd like you to talk just about the space, and two, carbon credits. Is there a carbon credit model that is coming into the space where farmers are growing agave? Because we've seen that it is fantastic at sequestering carbon. Is there a incentive? Is there what's happening so far from what you know? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so maybe I'll share my screen, a quick video again. Oop, I'm disabled again. If I can share my screen one more time. Sorry about that, James. Yeah, so we worked with a large farm, the one that I showed you in the video that had the large containers in the warehouse. They have thousands of hectares and thousands of heads of cattle. So we were working with them on planting out their thousands of hectares of cattle. So you can do it, as you said, in a number of different ways. You can either plant it within the field, but as you said, sometimes that can compete with arable land for other crops. So often, agave is perfect for sort of the waste areas of land, anywhere that you have erosion, anywhere that there's sort of land where the soil is very poor and doesn't hold any moisture. The agave is a great plant to basically hold the space, hold the soil intact, and sort of provide shade for the land, make sure it's cool and helping it retain moisture. So in terms of planting, there's two different strategies. There's the specific planting it within the field, but then the sort of putting it in all of the places that you don't use for anything else. And I think both are very valid and useful, for the farmer that doesn't want to commit to this full time. It does take a number of years for agave to mature. So maybe starting by putting it in the waste areas in your field, seeing how they progress, and then deciding whether you want to use it in a different cropping system. So I'm still disabled from sharing here, but basically what they've done in Mexico is they've created basically different widths of planting. So often you'll see very wide, almost, probably 20, 30 meters in between agave rows. And then they will plant what they call milpas, or corn, beans, and squash, in between the rows of agave. And what the agave do, particularly when they're mature, is they supply a windbreak, which I know, at least in Madagascar, is a big problem. Our wind erosion is one of the bigger problems that we have with soil health. So by planting them in a line, you're sort of providing a little, especially with the trees, as Sue was talking about, you're really providing a good windbreak to protect your crops. So working it in, not necessarily as a monocrop or as the only thing within a field, but as a tool within a sort of a more diversified crop rotation, I think is very important to use. Okay, so now I can share my screen just really quickly. You can see if this video works. Let's see here. And this will also show just a bit about the production process as well, so you can sort of see a different way that a different organization is doing it. And I know this is in Spanish, but there's subtitles on the bottom.
Termina su desarrollo lleno de azúcares, proteínas, minerales vitaminas y agua hasta 70%.
So this is kind of what I wanted to show you here. This is one of the examples where they have a large field, and you can see they've planted the agave on contour, which means they've measured the height of their field and made sure that their lines, rather than going straight through the field, they bend through the field so that the water, as it runs downhill, will always be caught in the line of the agave. So what it does is it really promotes water infiltration into the field. Rather than running off down your field, the agave acts as a little reservoir, so the water catches, stops, and then sinks into the system. And so you really are saving much more of the water that you do get by planting in these long rows and contours. And you can see here they're planting 2 rows every 15, 20 meters. So here they are cutting the fibers again.
Así se extrae la pulpa y se almacena en un tambo comprimiéndose en una prensa de madera. Es muy importante.
And so you can see here this part, as she's saying, it's very important to smash the air out of it before you close the system. And that's the smaller airlock.
Se almacena en un lugar oscuro y fresco para que inicie el proceso de fermentación, que dura como mínimo 28 días, siendo lo ideal 45 días. Abriendo el tambo está listo para servir de alimento a tu ganado, sea res, borrego, chivo, puerco, burro y hasta gallinas. Se puede almacenarse hasta por 2 años.
So that's important too. So what she's saying there is basically once it's inside of the container and sealed, so there's no air, it can be stored for up to 2 years. It's good after 45 days, but if you want to keep it for 3 months or 6 months or longer, I think that is it's a viable strategy for the dry season. I know in Madagascar we have 2 months where all the rains arrive and everything's green and the livestock have more than they could possibly eat, and then 4 months later it's completely dry and the cattle are left to cactus and other things. So in terms of fitting into a dry season feeding pattern, I think this is very helpful for that. So to the trees and the additives. So basically the only thing that is not within this feed that would make it a complete package is sufficient protein. And so you can add in protein in a number of different ways, but the solution that they found in Mexico is using the seed pods from the mesquite tree, the mavangue, I think, as Sue mentioned. So what they do with that is they collect the seed pods and grind them up, similar to the agave, make a fine powder out of that. And then they mix in the powder with the fermented agave silage. So you don't need to add it in beforehand. You can add it in afterwards. I'm also looking at, in Madagascar, I'm looking at moringa as a possible addition. I know it's fantastic for humans to eat as well, but if it's not being consumed there, I think moringa would be another fantastic additive. And Sue, through her experience, and I'm sure you guys, through all of your knowledge of the trees that are on your land, will be able to sort of figure out the best approach to finding the additive there. So I think it is fine on its own as a mix, maybe 25 to 50% of the intake for livestock. But once you add in the protein through either the powder, the mesquite, or the acacia, or whatever powder that you're using, that really makes it a more complete diet. And then to carbon credits. So we were working on it. It's carbon credits is one of those things where I don't really trust it at the moment. Right now, it seems like a lot of corporations want to be able to tell their customers that we're helping small farmers, and really what's happening is a lot of the money is getting sort of caught by middlemen and the verification schemes and systems and stuff like that. But We were working in Mexico on using drones to basically fly over agave fields, measure the density of the agave, and then we would cut down the agave and measure how much carbon in it. So we were working on a verification system with an organization called Hudson Institute, Hudson Carbon, to work on creating a basically a verifiable metric that we can then use as a foundation to measure off of. So basically right now, nobody has done carbon credits with agave before. So nobody knows how much carbon is in a field of agave. So it's very difficult to translate that to a scope or scale necessary to do credits. But I know people are working on it, and if everything goes right, I would be hopeful in the next 5 years that something like that could be useful, and certainly, it needs to happen to help people transition to this system. So it looks like you're still muted there. Well, I'm sure we can. Oh, I can stop sharing here. Let's see. How about maybe that will help.
I'm finally unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to mute, Sue. Fantastic. I hear you about the verifiable metric for the carbon credits. Look forward to hearing more about that, because I think that would really help to kick agave off in a big way. I mean, climate change is not going away. We seriously need to get on top of how we're going to keep our livestock alive with alternate systems, and this definitely looks like one. I noticed that the people working the agave in that particular video, it looked like they were wearing hazmat suits. Is it dangerous? Does it produce toxins? What happens?
Yeah, so it's basically one of the things that makes agave super resilient in the field is it's got some compounds called saponins and lectins. So saponins are what you use to make soap. Right. And so, you guys may know, I know in Madagascar, they make soap out of the roots of the sisal plants. Yeah, it's got a wonderful saponins in there. And then lectins are another sort of toxic compound that prevent it from getting eaten. So when you chop up the fibers, it's just a little bit irritating. So it's not dangerous in any fashion. It's more just sort of a little bit of skin irritation that is a bit uncomfortable when the machine is sort of sending out all the fiber and the chemicals into the air. So yeah, some people don't mind it at all. Some people like the hazmat suits. Just a long sleeve and gloves is pretty much enough. Maybe some glasses. But yeah, so basically the fermentation system or the fermentation process is what converts those chemicals, the saponins and the lectins, into a less toxic compound that can then be consumed by animals.
Okay. Does it take time for the animals to get used to it, or do they just take to it quite?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I definitely would not expect to switch to 100% agave forage or silage immediately. I would definitely integrate it over time, starting 10-25%, I think is a good number to start with. But it's, you as a human can smell the sweetness. You can, it's almost, it's not, you wouldn't eat it yourself, but you can smell it and you're like, okay, yeah, I understand why this would be appealing. So it's almost self-evident once you smell it.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to open the floor for others to ask questions. If you've got a question, raise your hand, and James, I will let you do the monitoring of the questions that are
yeah, we can also put it in the chat, and I can take a look there as well.
Perfect. Or put your question into the chat. My last one is a little bit about, well, first of all, I think that it's fantastic that it can be stored up to 2 years. because our rains, as we know, with climate change, are going to be coming hard and fast, and we're going to get El Nino, El Nina, all these kinds of differences coming. So we really need to be thinking about optimizing where we can. So my question about the, growing the plant, it takes a little time before, maybe you could speak to that. How long does it take before you can harvest?
Sure.
And where we're looking at plantations that are using things like sisal, where the leaves are not as thick or nor as fat or as productive as the agave that you showed us, because there are very many different species of agave. Sure. My question is, when we look at the output from a factory, the waste output from a factory, how much of that can we theoretically convert? Because if we want to start looking at feed and feed for climate solutions now, our first go-to should be, and I hope we did reach out to the sisal plantation experts, and I hope that some of them have joined in this call. How long, how much of what comes out as waste can be converted into feed? Just as an example, some information.
Yeah, sure. And I see Lawrence in the chat is also asking sort of how long does it take to go to maturity from seedling or raised from seed. So it takes a long time. It's not something we can sort of whitewash. It's average maturity, I would say, is 7 to 15 years. Some plants do it quicker. Sisal, I think, is more like 7. Some of those bigger plants that you see is probably more like 13. But the key there is that the agave plant has a number of different adaptations for reproduction that make it extremely easy to reproduce. So I don't know if you saw in the first video that I played from Mexico, where they were planting the fields, they had baby agaves. I'm sure some of you guys have seen, but if you check the next time you see an agave plant, if you look around the bottom, you'll see these tiny little offshoots, basically genetic copies, exact replicas of the parent plant shooting out underneath it. So when you harvest an agave plant, or even before it's mature, you can then replace it or take those little babies and plant them in the field. So most often in Mexico, and sort of once the system gets started, you're starting with basically 2-year-old plants rather than starting from seedling. So the plants that you saw when they were transferring, they were as big as my head. So those have already had 2 years of growth. So if you can, excuse me, if you can identify and source those seedlings, or not the seedlings, but the offshoots, the little baby plants, that will accelerate the system's maturity by at least 2 years. So it sounds like you guys already have a variety of agave in Kenya, so that certainly starting from seed is something that you can do, but there's other ways to get that system going faster. And then sort of to your point about using what you guys already have in Kenya with sisal and the other stuff. So the fiber that they take from for the sisal factory, I was working with an institute in Mexico that believes they waste about 95% of the biomass. So they basically strip the fiber out and throw everything else away. That's the leaves, the middle, the stem, the heart of the plant, and then the roots as well. So, it's not all functional, but certainly 95% of, or estimates are that 95% of the agave plant is thrown away in the fiber production process. And that's also similar to the sugar and alcohol production process. So I'll just touch on this a little bit briefly. It's a little bit outside what we were talking about, but agave is also an excellent producer of sugar over the long term. Basically, the reason why it takes so long to go to maturity is that it's slowly collecting sugar, and it's storing it in the middle of the plant. So when you cut off the leaves to make fiber, or to make this forage for livestock, this feed, the middle, the heart of the plant is left behind. And that's where all the sugars are. So in Mexico, they use it both to make syrup, as well as using it to make alcohol. So they'll take the sugars, they'll roast it, ferment it into alcohol, and then distill it to make tequila and mezcal. So tequila is something you may have heard of that comes from the agave plant. So the point being here is that there are many different ways to use the agave plant, and some of which can have a nice synergy where you can take the fiber to make rugs and rope, then you can take the biomass to make livestock feed, and then you can take the sugars to make sweetener, syrup, or alcohol. So there's a number of different options there that I think it's important to explore all of the options. And then yeah, I think that was your last question there. Maybe I already answered your question about carbon.
Super, thank you. So let's go to the questions that we're seeing in the chat and any raised hands. The floor is yours, everybody. Thank you all for joining. I hope we've given you sufficient information around this program and around this, around the possibilities of bringing this innovation into some of our areas on different scales. Let's hear your views.
Good. So maybe I'll just go through the questions in the chat really quickly. Emmanuel is asking about drones. So we were using the drones just as an imaging tool to visualize everything, to take pictures of everything in the field. And then once we had the pictures, we were cutting those down and measuring them, how much they weighed and how much carbon was inside of them. So we could then say, all right, a tree that is this big in the picture has this much carbon in it, or an agave, same thing. So I'm not sure about a cave project in Madagascar, but that's what we were using drones for. Let's see. When used as silage, can it be mixed up with other fodder? From Alois, Kenneth. Yes, absolutely. So as we said, we recommend mixing it with some sort of powderized protein. So again, the acacia, the mesquite, the prosopis, the mavenge, moringa, anything along those lines. And then we, in Mexico and in Madagascar as well, we recommend doing it as part of a rotational grazing system. So they would move, I think the livestock spent about 4 to 6 hours in the pasture, and then we would feed them at night from in their pens. So we were absolutely doing both a mix within the individual feeding, but then also a mix of feeds to make sure that they were also getting pasture, grass, and stuff like that as a mix. So certainly grass as a mixture, or hay as a mixture with the system, I think would be important. We've got a question on the nutritional value of the agave plant. Is it good for dairy cows? So I don't have direct work with dairy cows. We've been mostly working with sort of slaughterhouses to work on abattoir cows. But I have no suggestion to believe that it would adversely affect milk cows. But certainly, as with anything, don't start right away and throw everything into it. I would go step by step, take 1 or 2 cows, introduce them, a bit into their diet and see how it goes, and then grow from there.
If I could just jump in there quickly.
Sure, please.
When we look at abattoir cows, I think you mean beef cows.
Yes.
Beef cattle.
Yeah.
But when we look at the different cattle and the different quality of their yields, in my mind, agave is coming, or the first thing we should be thinking about is saving our animals. Our animals are dying. They don't have food. So it doesn't matter that this may not be a prime milk additive, giving you, extra or comparative milk yields, but it will stop your animal dying. It is food, where in this case, we have got, I think the data out there in Kenya at the moment is, if I'm not mistaken, approximately 1 million cattle have died just within this drought period across the pastoralist animals. So this is kind of like where I picture agave stepping in as a stopgap measure, and then it'll probably become a long-term strategy for when times are hard, because it takes a long time to grow, but when it does, it's useful. So on that note, we wouldn't want to be going and ripping them all up in the garden now and feeding them to our animals because it's such a good thing to do, because we're going to have no breeding stock. Those plants, we need to be looking at using their babies, growing their babies.
So I think you nailed that perfectly. I think it is exactly that. It's a reservoir. It's a store. It's a reserve for hard times. And you know, unfortunately, a lot of places we're in hard times right now. So we've got to do a bit of both. We got to be able to use it now, and we got to be able to save it for later. So I think you nailed that perfectly, Sue. So let's see, who is funding the program in Madagascar, government or collaboration of partners and government? So yeah, I'm basically starting my own company to bring this to Madagascar. I'm working on a pilot project with a large slaughterhouse, so they will be funding part of the project. Basically, we're working with their small holder farmers who help sort of feed the system. So we'll be working with them to create a network to do this. So it's partially funding myself, partially funding through a partnership. And then I'm also, as I mentioned, they're looking that you can make alcohol from the agave plant. So I'll also be trying to create a tequila in Madagascar, so creating my own alcohol company as well that will help fund the reforestation and some of the outreach efforts. So trying to make it a little bit of a mixed system where we're really taking a holistic look at the agave and how we can use it in all the different parts. How nutritious is it? I think we sorry, go ahead, Sue.
Will you name your tequila Madquila?
Yeah, exactly. It's I can't call it tequila because it's, you know, it's like champagne. It's bounded to Mexico. You can only call it tequila in Mexico. But there is actually a couple companies in South Africa that are making it already. If you guys want to check out some African agave alcohol, it exists. So how nutritious is it? We sort of covered a bit of that. But it's sort of it's wonderful in carbohydrates and sugars and fibers and all that sort of stuff. The only thing that we've recognized that and it's actually excellent for ruminants. It's because it has sort of those microbes and fermented things. It's excellent for the ruminant microbiome. So it's certainly helpful for ruminant livestock there. The only thing we've identified is the protein addition would be useful. The propagation, we talked about that a little bit. Seeds and splits, you can do both. You know, seeds you can grow more. Splits you're based off, or you know, the offshoots is based off of how much you have available to you, but certainly accelerates the growth and is a little bit easier. Let's see. Can agave feed cause bloat to the livestock? Yeah, maybe. You know, I'm sure. You know, I think what part of the fermentation process and the off-gassing, as you saw with the closed container and the airlock system, is maybe getting rid of some of that off-gassing and that bloat before it even goes into the livestock. So a bit of that processing that would otherwise be going on inside of the animal, creating that bloat, is happening beforehand within the fermentation system. So I think if anything, it should be able to help a little bit with the bloat. But that's just, there's no science behind that. That is just.
Yeah, I think that when we look at the reasoning behind bloat, which is actually very much around fiber. So when animals are fed very lush green stuff that's not very fibrous and there's a lot of nitrogen in it, then they can get bloat. But I think that the agave, because there's so much fiber in this stuff. So one of the ways of curing bloat is by feeding your animals with hay in the morning before they go out and eat lush feed. So I'm imagining, again, I'm no expert in this space, and maybe if we've got any veterinary officers or anyone with any experience of feeding agave to the animals here, they tell us. And if not, we can find out and bring that information back to anyone with that question. But I think in my mind, because it looks so fibrous, that it would do the opposite of creating bloat. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I think we have one or two more here. Can you do 100% agave? Or so first, once you open the tin after 45 days, how long should it be consumed? You know, we'd recommend that once you open it, it would be consumed relatively quickly. It starts to oxidize once you take it out. You know, that's why the smaller containers, the size of the container really depends on your operation. So if you have smaller animals where you just need a little bit at a time, maybe the smaller container is right for you, so you don't have to open them all at once. Or if you have a larger operation, then the larger size might be easier, so you can have 1 or 2 cows eating from the same container.
And I suppose where you're talking there about your feed flow rate.
Sure, exactly.
You would probably see it changing. You'd probably see it oxidizing or going bad, and you don't want to feed that to your animals, or you'd probably see that the animals would refuse to eat it. If it was offensive, they probably wouldn't want to eat it. Ellie's question there is interesting because obviously he's had experience with animals that are eating sisal. I'm wondering if remember I asked you about the hazmat suits and the irritability. So if an animal is just eating it as pure sisal, does it get irritated? Could that be what this?
That is exactly what that is. So it's a situation where like I said, it's the lectins and the saponins are causing irritation. So the fermentation, absolutely. If you feed it to them raw, they'll eat it. They're not necessarily happy about it, and it can cause some issues. So that's really where the fermentation system, you know, I hate to say it, fermentation changes things, but you know, that's part of the whole process, right? Is we're really converting chemical compounds into something else, and that's changing it.
On that note, Samsung SMX205, that is Sylvia Makitosha. If any of you know Sylvia, she's she's currently in Belgium, up the mountain somewhere, but she has a fantastic farm of gear cross animals in Malindi. And against all odds, she's been doing something very, very similar to what you've been doing with the agave.
Oh yeah,
Taking a mix of feeds, but bringing it down to that fermented silage. But she calls it fermenting almost garbage. That's turning into and using wood. And Sylvia, can you unmute yourself and maybe speak to us about this? Her animals through this drought being fed on 25% wood chippings and chippings and dust from the sawmills that have been fermented with microbes have actually maintained their milk yields from non-drought periods, which is completely crazy. I'm hoping, so she's on. Hey, hi Sylvia.
Yes, good afternoon. So, you know, I have some issues and I haven't really backed out the Zoom meeting yet because it's the very first meeting I am attending. But I have listened until now, and it's very, very good because, you know, at the coast in Kenya, we have this really, really huge sisal plantation. So there's a lot of agave around, but, you know, okay, we didn't start with the agave. We just started with the fiber, sawdust, wood shavings, you know, things which nobody really would think about feeding to cows. We milled them, we fermented them, and then actually we started feeding them. We saw very, very good results. Cows started increasing milk production, and then we sent a sample to crop nuts for analysis, and then actually that analysis until now it is being disputed by everybody who saw it. They say it's impossible. You know, you can't get values like that out of fermenting sawdust and whatever be added to that mix. But you know, our cows, they're eating it so nicely and they are really producing milk from it. So there must be something behind it, really.
And, you know, Sylvia, I saw your results from crop nuts, 15% protein. She's got 50, I think you said 50% maize germ, 25% wood shavings and things, and then 25% literally just really poor quality hay and leaves and anything that she could scrabble together, mixing it all together with Molo Plus microbes, letting it ferment. And literally she has the dairy world here not believing what's going on. But her animals are alive, they're producing milk. They wouldn't be producing milk if they weren't healthy. There's just stuff. And you know, in my exploration space now, going into soil microbes, I'm like, yeah, there's stuff in there that we still don't know, we haven't yet explored. And that's so cool. So Sylvia,
Yeah.
hopefully we can do an entire forum for you where you can show us the photographs of your beautiful animals. I know that you've been breeding them. The genetics of your animals are 50% gear now, plus so they're not the what do you call it? The exotic dairy, the Frisian or the Jerseys or anything. You've actually managed over time, over how many years?
We are there for over 30 years now, about 32 years. We started with the gear about 10 years ago, but before we had the gear, we heavily used the Sahiwal. So we started with the Bos Indicas long time ago, and we are almost beyond 50% Bos Indicas genetics in our heart now. And you see, really our main center of attention was breeding until the repeated droughts really hit us so badly. So now we are really trying to work out how to feed the animals, because you can breed the best animals in the world. If you don't have any food for them to survive, they won't help you. And now we have we're really into silage making, and making silage out of almost anything you could think of. And we're really trying to perfect that art. And this latest, that latest test series we did, that was really very interesting, because it showed that really low quality fiber, once you ferment it well, it can really come out as very useful food for livestock.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sylvia.
Sign me up for that panel. I want to hear it.
Perfect. So we have one person ready to come into your forum, sure. Sylvia. We'll do that when you're back in Kenya. Fantastic. I can see there's a hand up there. Techno.
Can you unmute
Techno.
Come on.
17. Go ahead.
I was wondering whether it's possible for the presenter to start a project in Kenya as well. Is it possible?
Personally, probably not at the moment. I was supposed to be heading back to Madagascar today, but I had some visa issues, so I'll be heading back to Madagascar in 2 weeks. But we are absolutely here to help people start whatever project they want. So we don't have a ton of resources, we don't have a ton of funding. As I said, I'm sort of bootstrapping my own project, but we really want to be a resource to help with everything you can. So through Sue or you, I'll put my contact info in the chat here. You guys can reach out to me, and we'll put you in touch with Regeneration International to really try to help you guys with everything that you need. We won't be able to provide any funding, but any information that you need, we will have for you guys.
That's really great, because at the end of the day, funding is not everything. It is actually expertise, and expertise generally is very expensive. So what you're basically saying is that people can tap into your expertise.
Absolutely.
But the funding and the land and the other things like that, they need to be taken care of either. So I can see somebody there that said there's a farmer with more than 200 acres. Is it worth investigating? If we take, and I wish I had done the math, can you please mute microphones, please? Some of you have got microphones on. Judy, the microphone is on. It's creating a discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we look at today's prices in Kenya for livestock feed during this drought, I mean, I'm not even going to talk about this last year. I'm a cattle producer. I breed Ancoles, or I was, because I had to sell all of my Ancoles because I couldn't afford to continue feeding them. Hay went up about 3 years ago. I was feeding hay bales, and I was able to buy a hay bale for under 100 shillings for one bale. That was landed price in Nanyuki. By the time I stopped with my cows, it was 450 shillings a bale. I was feeding them on about 1,500 to 2,000 shillings a day. I was breeding my animals for the genetics because I love the animal. I was not getting any return in terms of instant return like milks and yields and stuff. So my answer to anybody who wants to make a big investment in this is look at the livestock feed prices and try and position yourself. Remember, it's going to take time before these things grow and before they're even ready to be harvested. For smallholders and others, and these could be individuals who are in this group, individuals who are within supply chains of other people, advise your smallholders to grow agave down the sides of their fences. Their animals won't die. They could be growing during the next rainy season and they could keep growing for the next 3 to 4 years, completely oblivious to being used, but at that time of need, they're there. And it's just knowledge that is missing, and we can get that out there. We're not, somebody in the group here said, should we add molasses? Well, you've seen that the animals find it palatable anyway, so why add molasses? There's obviously enough sugar in this plant to do the job of feeding the microbes, and that's why it ferments. Adding molasses into poor quality ingredients gives them that extra sugar for them to ferment. Josh Creamers, I'm really sad that he's not here, and I feel really bad I forgot to invite him into the chat, but he would tell you that grasses and things, and depending on when you harvest your materials for your silage, most people make maize silage and they harvest the maize or throw in used and spent maize cobs and maize stalks. There are no sugars in them, and that's why you need to add in your sugars, and you do that with molasses to feed the microbes that are going to be breaking down, because at the end of the day, those maize stalks are as non-nutritious really in their state as maybe the stuff that Sylvia's talking about, the woody parts, the woody bits. It's the microbes that then break them down. Don't go to an extra mile if you don't need to. Don't add sugar to silage if you don't need to. Make sure you're working with the material that can do it. That's a much more cost-effective way of doing it.
And also, and just to back up on that, agave, like Sue was saying, agave has all the sugar that it needs if you just know where to look and find it. So I mean, just search agave syrup on Google next time, and you'll see it just comes back with lists and lists of agave syrup. So they're extracting sugar from it anyway, so you don't need to extract it and put it back in. It's in there, particularly in the stem. So you'll be able to find the sugars in there.
Wonderful. Do we have any more questions in there? I like Diego's comment. He says, with information, we can build the foundation for making high quality feed for our livestock using the available raw materials like agave and maize stalks and other waste. That's absolutely cool. Somebody said to me the other day, we were talking about soils, and we were talking about regenerating soils and how our soils have been so decimated. Remember that this agave will grow on poor soils again, so that's an advantage to us. But they were saying to me, what do I need? What should I grow? And I said to them, grow your brain. First, grow your brain. Get as much information and knowledge as you possibly can. There is no silver bullet, but you're going to make fewer risky decisions if you have the knowledge. We're here to provide the knowledge. So reach out to the networks, to the people that you're meeting through these forums, and build your knowledge, because then you'll be making the decisions that everyone's decisions are going to be different. They have raw materials, different rainfall, different soil types, different sizes of farms, different livestock, different needs. There's no solution that can be a silver bullet to everyone. But once you've built the knowledge, you've grown the knowledge, you can start making decisions that work for you, and then sharing them with other people in your same situation. So any other hands up? Any questions that we see there that are unanswered? Okay, so this is what I'm going to do now. I would like us all to really appreciate Riker for having joined us. And I'd like to appreciate all of you by thanking you all for joining us. So we can all go to our reaction button and look for the, this might take a while and it goes off, look for the hands or the heart or the whatever it is you'd like to add there to really appreciate Riker for sharing this with us. before we all go. And maybe you can put your cameras on as well.
Thank you guys. It's been a pleasure. I really am so grateful for you guys to spending your nights. You know, I know how valuable just your time is. And so you know, I really do appreciate you guys, and really I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you, Riker. Thank you so much, and good luck with your mad agave and
Yes.
your madakila, whatever you're going to call it.
Well,
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a long layover in Nairobi on my way to Tana. So I'll try to plan it.
Very good. Come and meet us.
Yes, of course. Bye, guys. Cheers.
Good night, everybody. Take care till next time. Bye-bye from Team iCow. Thank you, Team iCow, who've been helping out. Thank you, James. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.